Welcome, everybody, to Embracing the Present and Preparing for the Future at the Ohio University Music Conference. Thank you for joining us. My name is Shain Shapiro. I'm a Canadian living in London. I run a company called Sound Diplomacy. We work globally with cities and governments and real estate developers on music strategy and policy. I am very, very excited to be joined by these four geniuses of the live music community, we will call them. But first, I'll kind of let them introduce themselves. So first Candace, and then Cindy, Tim, and then Moose. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Candace Newman. I am the CEO and founder of Live Out Live, which is an LA-based nonprofit that creates access and opportunity for future diverse leaders of the live entertainment industry. Live Out Live is inspired by my own career and journey within the live entertainment industry. I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
I'm Cindy Barber. I'm a co-founder of the Beachland Ball Room and Tavern in Cleveland, Ohio. It's in an old Croatian social hall where we're the anchor of a reviving urban neighborhood. And I'm also the executive director of Cleveland Rocks, past, present, and future, which was started in 2012 to help the music economy in Cleveland, Ohio. And it's pivoted with this pandemic, and we've been helping musicians and venue workers with grants and venues themselves try to stay afloat in Northeast Ohio.
Hey, I'm Tim Peaock, and I am the artistic director of Stuart's Opera House and the Nelsonville Music Festival, which are both in rural Southeast Ohio. I'm also the co-founder of Melted Music Festival in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm Moose. I am the managing partner at Marauder. We're a New York-based company that acts as the direct connection between our international roster of clients and the North American market. So we work a lot with artist managers, record labels, music conferences, government export offices, etc. We run Independent Venue Week in the U.S., and I also am one of the co-founders of the National Independent Venue Association, NIVA, the executive director of NIVA, and the executive director of the companion 501c3 National Independent Venue Foundation.
It's an incredible group of people we have here. I feel very, very blessed and very lucky. And I want to start with some optimism. I think that the compliment sandwich, right? You start with something good, and then we'll work our way through something a bit more challenging and end with something good. So I'm going to start kind of, Cindy, what are you most looking forward to in the next couple months? Like looking not only from a business perspective, but also, as a lover of live music.
Well, shows. We're going to try to start putting on shows again. We actually did our first show last Thursday. Well, it was in late February at this point, but we can only do 64 people, so we're still spacing people out. But just the idea of having live music on my stage again is inspiring and relieving.
Yeah, and it is, same here in the UK. They're starting to think about shows. We can't have shows until April. But, Candace, like, what are you most looking forward to other than going to shows? Like, I think what I want to get at with the four of us is, what changes have happened in the last year that kind of can create some hope and move us forward in a positive way to the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I piggyback you guys' sentiment about seeing live shows, but I think the vaccinations are giving us all a glimmer of hope and bringing us back to the other side of what this pandemic is looking like and allowing us to potentially put on some shows. I think that we should focus on how we're going to move forward in steps and bringing live back in a healthy way for the community. I would love for us to get back to shows in large scale capacity, but ultimately I would just love for us as a community to get vaccinated, put in a plan to move forward in a safe way, and eventually get back to what we all love here, which is the live business.
yeah, and Moose, I think you're in touch with thousands of venues that are grappling with similar and different issues, I'd say. And what are the things that, other than putting on shows, my thinking is, do you think that, for example, some processes and some ways of doing shows will improve because of some of the challenges that we faced, like looking into the future?
I mean, I think it says something that all of us instinctively were probably thinking, like, shows. That's the one thing that we want to see come out of this, and it's such a given. But what I'm really excited about is the level of community that has been created over the last year of strife. And necessity is necessity is the mother of all invention. And so, through the last year, we've had a significant number of collaborative movements that have happened, not just nationally like NIVA, but locally. Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but Cleveland was basically reborn, right? So it was, you had a head start. Because you already had this group together, and obviously there were more people that were likely welcomed, but the foundation was there to be able to build upon. And many places in the country didn't have the same type of community. So as you finished your own business for the day, that was it. You were done, and you weren't able to necessarily, I don't necessarily want to use the word collaborate, because collaboration is part of it, but you didn't even necessarily have the peer network. The folks that knew the pain points or the struggles that you were going through, and simple things like, hey, who designed that poster for you? It's really cool. I wouldn't mind sending them some money as well. To I'm having an HR issue and I'd love to pick somebody's brain as to what they dealt with and how they're going through something like this. So I think now that you have people that know each other, even if it came out of a really difficult time, I think we're more likely to see collaborations come together. I think we're more likely to see promoters work with venues they would otherwise not have had access to, which is, I think, is wonderful. I think that a lot of the community members that have, shown support are going to be able to do things that they might not have otherwise been able to do on such a local level. And I also think a lot of the rooms themselves, the venue owners, are going to be more likely to, I'll use the phrase, kind of start from scratch, because a lot of the systems that were in place, whether it was weekly or monthly, show nights, or whether it was just working with the same people you already worked with, a lot of that has changed just because of the times we're in. So hopefully it'll leave more opportunities for new things and creative opportunities we can all benefit from.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, as you're saying, and in our work, we work a lot with cities, and we are seeing local groups, become stronger at advocating for themselves externally, right, to other sectors or to other issues. And I'm curious how that's worked rurally, Tim, as well. When you have simply less people around, and how, so from your perspective, what are you most looking forward to other than going to shows and staging shows? And I'd like you to comment on what Moose said from your perspective of kind of prioritizing a rural area rather than a city.
Yeah, so no one told me that there was any bit of optimism within this panel, so I'm not sure why I was chosen to be on it. But if I can make my glass half full, and from the rural perspective, I think that what I am most looking forward to, it is related to getting back to having live shows, but it's not for the same reasons. And no one said anything that I shouldn't bring up politics, so shame on them. But I think, especially in rural areas, probably everywhere, I think getting back to live community events where people of all walks of life gather, I am hopeful that that change will start to de-isolate us, and we remember that we're all just humans and interacting with each other, and we all love music, or we all love dance, or whatever that might be, and maybe shit will mellow out a little bit. So that's my most hopeful point of view at this moment. And
That's
go ahead, Shain.
No, please. I had a question for Candace on, in that well, one of the things that I'm most hopeful about is, how can I say this, is that we're certainly becoming far, far more prioritized towards diversity in whatever the definition of that word means. Because in the United States, it means something different than over here. It means something different in other places as well. And I'm curious from your perspective, Candace, I'm not saying if your job is going to get easier, I don't mean it that way, but is there less of a sales pitch now? And do you feel like the priority of your work, which has always been a priority and should always be a priority, is becoming more prevalent or recognized, or it's late here, I'm trying to think of that word, now that we come out of this, and we'll see a different ecosystem when live music returns? Or do you sense that we're not there yet?
I think that we are moving closer to being there. I think that this time has given us an opportunity to take a beat and take a look at the landscape of the live business from every perspective, not only those who are going to be featured on stage, but those of us that are behind the scenes that are pushing live. I think that the pandemic has allowed us an opportunity to really connect on a different level and see who is available to bring different perspectives to the live space and to connect as a community. So part of that community are diverse faces, and this has been a chance for us to connect and see who is involved in that landscape and giving people more of a push and a forefront in the diverse space. I also think that this has been a good time for us to not really be performative, but to take a beat, especially after what happened last summer and how everyone took a pause and really started to focus on diverse endeavors and really implement that right now while we have a chance in the time before we get back to the live space, so that it's much more prevalent and available when we do get back to live. So yes, I think that we are inching closer. We have a long way to go because we've been so far behind, but we're getting there, and people are paying more attention to it and having more conversations about it and communing about it. So that's what's important, having open dialogue about what that landscape looks like and being open-minded about what the future of live looks like when it comes to diversity.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Cindy, from the Cleveland Rock's perspective as well. Obviously, Cleveland being an incredibly diverse place and incredibly diverse musical place. I saw one of my first shows in Cleveland when I was 13. Grew up not too far away from there, but I'm thinking, what are your thoughts in relation to this? Do you feel like we are actually moving into a more equitable live music ecosystem coming out of this, or are we not there yet?
Cleveland's a tough town. It's been traditionally very segregated. I mean, the Beachland has been, made a priority for doing like old school R&B and soul music from the very beginning. And I think we were only open a year, and we did a special celebration of Jimmy Scott's 75th birthday and flew his band in from New York and things like that we have done over the course of time. With Cleveland Rocks, with the nonprofit, we're definitely going to kind of move forward in prioritizing diversity. I'm working with one of my board members to do something called Soul City Cleveland. So we're going to start interviewing some of the older musicians that toured. I sort of take care of this elder gentleman called Crazy Marvin, who played with Sly and the Family Stone back in the day, and he lives near me, so I sort of watch over him. And people like that, there's a lot of musicians that had singles in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. So we're going to start to interview them, but we're going to start to use youth from high schools and college to do the interviews, so that we can kind of learn from your elders and kind of learn what the music business is, because the tradition of the music business in some ways is a microcosm of what happens in real life, right? So a lot of those elder Black musicians got basically screwed back in the day and paid $100 for their songs. I mean, that, Chuck Berry, was a partner with Alan Freed back in the day and signed over his publishing to Alan Freed. So that's what happened back in the 50s and 60s. And we're going to sort of use that as an educational tool.
Yeah. And I think like Moose as well, are you, I want to stick on we're staying with optimism for a little bit longer, and then we'll move into pragmatism, maybe realism. But Moose, I know that NIVA has multiple subcommittees and many members and quite a complex ecosystem. How have you seen the impact and the importance of diversity be kind of reflected in the decisions that you guys are taking as an organization? And then in that regard, from an optimistic perspective, do you see that kind of trickling down into how venues are changing the way they think about themselves?
Well, I think we were in a unique situation from the very beginning because we didn't exist a year ago. So for us, as the organization was created, we could intentionally try to come up with systems of making sure that when there were groups of people, that they were as representative as possible with the tools that we had. We very purposefully went out and tried our best to be able to, welcome members that were outside of the initial email lists in the hopes that we could get more inclusion and representation from those that have been actively participating. We started a DEI task force very early on to be able to address, some of these needs in a more hands-on basis. So it wasn't just, the executive board at the time, which was all white, coming up with decisions that felt that they would be appropriate for communities that we weren't a part of. So, I think that when you're talking about diversity and inclusion, it takes intent, and it doesn't just accidentally happen, or the issue doesn't resolve itself over time. It takes people very purposefully going out of their way to acknowledge a gap and then coming up with systems or processes that allow some type of resolution towards that gap. Right now, I think we're in a fortuitous position where many of the businesses are going to be rehiring. So they can look at their hiring practices and they can think to themselves, what have I done in the past and what do I need to do now? The easy thing is you hire who you had working, which is what most people will do, and that's perfectly fine. But a lot of people relocated. They've gotten other jobs, so there will still be gaps. And it's a matter of, reaching outside of your usual spaces to make sure that you're getting access to the most talented people available. I think some of that is also going to be in, what Cindy just said, as far as, who you're booking, what type of audience you're trying to attract. Who are the communities that you're speaking to? Are you speaking to the people that you've sold tickets to in the past? Or are you speaking to people that you want in your room because you feel that you have programming that would be appealing to them and their communities? And so, again, it all takes intention. There's also a lot of inherent racism and classism and sexism and some of the processes that we don't have direct control over. The easiest example is just insurance. And having insurance policies that have hip hop clauses, which, I don't see how you could argue it's anything but racist. So I feel that there's different policies that now we have, we're better prepared to be able to take action against. And the fact that inequality has been so much at the forefront of the national narrative for so long, I think makes it a lot easier for somebody who might otherwise feel unempowered to be able to show up to work and say, we need to prioritize this. This is why it's important. And here's all the benefits that come from it. At this point, for better or for worse, and I think it's for better, shaming people into not taking action is kind of the default, the default, motivator. And that's perfectly fine. If the end result is still that, doors open for people that would otherwise not have these opportunities, and they're skilled and they're talented and they're bringing opportunities and they're expanding businesses, because that's what all the math has shown, right? The more diversity that's on your management level, the more diverse your staff is. All of these things are better economic creators. So there's no reason to shy away from the opportunity that's afforded to us right now.
Yeah, shaming is an economy in and of itself, I always say. But so Tim, I want to kind of stress, and one thing that I want to get your thoughts on, especially from not just from a rural perspective, from Columbus as well. One thing that we have seen is that venues have become more embedded in their communities because the community and the venue have kind of come together to try to protect each other as much as possible during the challenges that we've had. And one of the things is this whole venue as a community center kind of idea. And speaking from a Stuart Opera House perspective as well, like, do you feel that the relationship with your community, with your constituents, has improved because of this, and that will bode well, when we come out of this? And then I'm going to move to the more pragmatic questions after this last optimistic question.
I think that related to Stuart's Opera House, we're a historic 400-seat theater in Nelsonville, Ohio, rural Southeast Ohio. I think that our relationship with our audience has only strengthened, and I think this happened everywhere. I mean, people are we're not the only one wanting live. We're not the only ones, because our industry exists on it, that want activity on our stages again. Stuart's Opera House is a nonprofit organization, and it's hard to, I'm conflicted on saying this because so many have struggled hard in this last year, but our audience and our constituents stepped up more than they ever have, because they want to make sure we are here and ready to go when we're able to have live shows again. So our community voted with their dollar bills during the pandemic to make sure that we could, weather this storm. And I am so grateful. We're all grateful. I know that's not the situation everywhere. I know everyone hasn't been fortunate by any means, but I do think that voting with their dollars is testament to how important this work is wherever we are, rural or urban or internationally. I think that we need these events. We need art. We need live music for humanity to function.
Yeah, I think the emotional connection that people have with the process of music, as much as the music itself, has improved. I feel, maybe this is me being overly optimistic, but it's because people, if you lose the space in which you hear music, then it creates an even more emotional connection. I'm curious what everyone thinks, or are we just all reverting to streaming more and more and more, which the statistics are demonstrating? And
I think here's the great illusion, right? The great illusion is that we're going to lose the spaces in which we can hear music. We won't. We will lose many of the spaces that we go to hear music and entertain ourselves, and we will lose many of the spaces that are community owned, independently owned, mom and pop owned, and the ones that are an actual core fabric of those communities. We will lose the spaces that birth new genres. We will lose the spaces that give the first opportunity to people to be able to step on stage. We will lose the spaces that help people grow from being able to play in front of 8 people to 800 people. That's what we will lose. And we will not lose the ability to go out and see live events, but the entire growth and the entire cultural aspect, the community aspect of it, that's going to be what's sacrificed if we lose the locally owned, independently owned, sole proprietor type of businesses that are being passion run by people that want to better their communities, that want to work with their neighbors, right? Like, stages aren't going to magically just all of a sudden not be there, but you're going to have fewer choices. You're not going to, your money's going to be going towards the coasts or a multinational company or a publicly traded company, and decisions are made for different reasons past just, I see this person handing out their mixtapes all the time, they're going to hustle to sell some tickets too, I'm going to take a chance and book them, right? And that's what launches careers.
Yeah, and I think this is a good segue to kind of what are I want to discuss kind of the things that we're not worried, but potentially concerned the most about over the next few months, because again, this is about embracing the present, and the present is very, especially you guys with the stimulus package and everything, things are in a bit of a stasis, and preparing for the future. And I guess, Candace, what concerns you the most as we move, as we hopefully all get vaccinated and move back into live music again? What are you hoping doesn't happen, or what potentially concerns you that may happen?
Well, some of the concerns are what Moose just touched on, which were venues closing for good. Here in Los Angeles, we have so many incredible venues that have been around for so long that have been heavily impacted. Also, the economy overall, like what I understand is for every dollar spent on live entertainment is $12 for the local economy. And I don't think that people realize that that live entertainment contributes so much to the economy overall. So there needs to be support on all levels, from city, local, government, I guess including corporations who can give funding for tax write-offs and having donations for culture endowment funding. I think that also state-by-state restrictions are also concerning for me. Different guidelines per state are going to heavily impact touring. So there are going to be certain compliance and measures that are going to have to be put into place in every single state, which will slow down the process and cause more resources to be used. Also, the overall economy, I think that we're going to have to really be mindful of how impacted the economy has been, and how people have lost jobs and opportunities where they can't afford those premium packages and high-priced tickets that normally contribute to the return on a live show. So just so many different aspects have impacted and are concerning as we move forward.
And Cindy, obviously from the Beachland Ball Room perspective, as well as Cleveland Rocks, I know that I'm curious, what are you, it's the same question, I'm not saying what keeps you up at night right now, I'm sure, but what are you hoping, doesn't happen in the next few months, in a way? What are you worried about as we move towards max vaccinations and being able to increase capacity in venues?
Well, I mean, we were lucky in that we got a few, just like what Tim is saying, our constituents stepped up. They've bought more merch from us than in the past year than ever, to keep us going. But we're running out of money again, and this shuttered venues is really slow to get online. And even then, how fast are we going to get that money into our hands? And I'm watching a lot of my fellow venues in Northeast Ohio, kind of, we're getting down to the wire. We're down to like another 30, 45 days before we are going to be in real trouble again. So we're starting to think about how we can raise money. And this all kind of speaks to what you're already doing, Shain, is like, how do we protect the future and get our local governments to see that this is a precarious industry and it needs to be protected. I mean, we bonded together years ago when we were all kind of bombarded by an admission tax that was 8% in the city of Cleveland. It was the second highest in the country after Las Vegas, and 8% off when you lose money on a show and you still have to pay 8% on money that you lost was just a complete insult. And it took us a huge undertaking to get council to back off that and change it to 0% up to 150 capacity and 4% up to 750. I'm still paying the 4%. I still think that's an insult. And they need to know that music can't be taxed that way, even at a larger scale, because touring is going to be precarious right now. It's expensive. It's even more expensive. And people are going to need years to recover from this setback. So how do we tell people that story? And we're trying to talk to mayoral candidates now to get them to understand.
It's yes, Tim, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I do think it's important to recognize the work that Moose and NIVA and probably all of us as down the ladder have done in helping tell that story, Cindy. That I do think now more than ever, our representatives understand. They still don't fully understand, but they understand better than they ever have in history what the arts bring to any city or community, thanks to, in part, the work of NIVA and the Save Our Stages campaign. I know that we have interacted with our representatives more in the last 11 months than we have in total the previous 10 years. So I do think we're gaining some traction in telling that story. And I think our audiences are learning that story as well. That, oh yeah, without shows happening at the Beachland or at Stuart's Opera House, the restaurant, well, it's closed, but the restaurant is also not having customers. So I'm hopeful that there has been education that has happened to just the general public and to our representatives in the White House.
You know what's interesting though about you saying that is that it wasn't a hard sell, right? When we first got all these venues together and promoters together and said, everybody's screwed. It's going to only get worse. We need government intervention. This is the help we need. There was no real twisting of the arms. The real difficult part was the introduction, because nobody had ever asked for help from this sector before.
Right.
And so the familiarity was there. Everybody went to these venues, or their kids did, their parents did, in many cases. And these are, they're people just like everyone else. So they're going to rock clubs or comedy shows or dance halls or whatever it is that people do with their free time. These are the places where people meet their significant others, where they drop their kids off for the night, whatever it is that's happening that evening. So it wasn't like we didn't have to convince somebody that we're some special interest group that is worth them paying attention to because, we have a large, voter access. That was where all the different individuals came in. And that's where, us having members in literally every single district across the country helped be able to get bipartisan support from the very beginning. But the real needles being moved were done locally. It was the owners that were reaching out to people, that are still reaching out to people and saying, I'm going to lose my business. It's the marquee out front that of. It's my house that has just been mortgaged again. It's my kids that had to come out of school or move back home or, whatever, had to empty your retirement plans because there's been no help. And those are the stories that, the elected officials, they're very tuned into what gets them elected. Right. And when you have people that have mailing lists that are in the tens or hundreds of thousands or millions in some cases, you're able to at least get that machine moving pretty quickly. We had 2.1 million emails sent to Congress on behalf of the venues and promoters, an unheard of amount for a special interest group. The live industry is the only sector that was called out in the COVID relief package that was passed at the end of the year, in addition to the airline industry, which the airline industry is included in every single, bailout program. So the argument was an obvious argument. We were the first to close. We'll be the last to open. We've never asked for help before. We need help. The rest of it just, it took time. It happened absurdly quickly from a government perspective. It's still in progress. So there's things that haven't happened yet that we wish would happen a lot more soon. But the overall process of it was we have a problem. Everybody acknowledged that problem is there. let's work together to find a solution. That it was unheard of to see something move this quickly. It's still not quickly enough, but we have to kind of acknowledge the fact that there was truly the impossible was done, but it was only done because people like you were very intimately involved. This was nobody else was going to do this for the community.
And yeah, I think it has presented an incredible opportunity. What you're talking about, Moose, I believe, is language. Is we've been able to speak the language of the person that we're speaking to better from an elected official perspective. And the live music industry, or the music industry in general, over the last 20 years has spoken a different language to elected officials, right? And I think that does present an opportunity in every town and city in the U.S. as to what's next. Now,
I mean, our language from the beginning was economic impact, right? Yeah. Here's employment centers. Here's the other businesses that depend upon us. Here's the the artists make 75% of their income from touring. When you have people that are furloughing staff by the hundreds, and there's no program that is going to be able to help minimize that impact. There was no program that was going to help minimize that impact. You see what's happening to your local district. So it requires government intervention at that point, which we were fortunate enough to be able to have acknowledged, and in an incredibly bipartisan way. I mean, it's easy for us all to kind of see us politics and them politics, but really this was really bipartisan.
Yeah, and so that I think looking as we're looking to the future again and preparing for the future, that relationship with government in whatever way, be it local, county, state, or national, has changed. In some places for better, in some places maybe it needs more improvement, but it has changed. And and I'm curious, Candace, as well on this is from your perspective, do you sense that that's also changed? Like, where not only is the economic value of these places being communicated, jobs and so on and so forth, and we all use the word workforce development now. I must use it 20 times a day, as Moose knows, in my work. But what about the fact that these places, to me, these venues, grassroots music venues, as we call them here, they are they are part of the diverse makeup of a community, right? The community is represented by these venues, and the venues are represented by the community. And I'm curious if you feel that that's also been articulated, so we can kind of blend that increased diversity means increased workforce, or we're not quite there yet.
I definitely think that there, like Moose mentioned, there's going to be some intentionality that is going to be needed in order to increase diversity in all of these spaces. We are inching closer. We are having the conversations, but I don't think that we're quite there yet because we don't really know what the landscape of the live business is going to look like or how people are going to be intentional about implementing diversity. I know that the conversations are being had. The intention, I believe, is there for a lot of people. There are some conversations that are leading to opportunities for a more diverse landscape. But I think that we have so far to go. I think that the conversation is a new conversation, one that should have been had so long ago, so that while we're here, we have an opportunity to implement some more diversity. But again, I'm hopeful for the conversations, the discussions, for some people in some places being extra intentional about implementing that. What's most important for me is not only seeing diverse acts on stage, but beyond the main stage. I want to see more crew members implemented in that ecosystem. I want to see more vendors as well, and people on larger levels like decision makers in management, tour management, and just giving opportunities to more diverse faces behind the scenes, not only on stage and not only in the audience, where you can profit off of the diverse business, but also putting money and resources and developing more diverse teams. So again, those conversations are happening. I believe that we will inch closer and closer to seeing that happen, but we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to maintain our optimism here, but Cindy, I was given a bunch of questions as well. Josh has been super nice to me. And is it going to be, and I guess one of the questions and one of the worries potentially that has been expressed in other places is it going to become at least temporarily more expensive to run a venue because of COVID and safety mitigation? And does that then get passed on to the consumer? Or is this another issue that we need to potentially start lobbying for and educating our constituents and elected officials? Because is that thing getting back to normal for a music venue, that presumably means more expensive, right?
Right. I mean, we have to have probably 3 or 4 more people than we would normally have, because we have to have people seated, and therefore there's servers going to the tables, whereas before you just go get your own beer at the bar. We have a host checking people's temperatures and assigning them to a seat where they're supposed to stay. All of that costs money. I mean, we've been doing the math, and we're not really making anything starting these shows again, but we feel a need to go ahead and start anyway, just to keep going and to start to employ people again, and to have at least a few people see music. We're putting shows on sale right now, and they're selling out instantaneously because there's only 64 people allowed to come and see a show. And if you cost it out, the cost of each ticket right now is probably double what it used to be.
There's so much pent up demand. Just here, the 140,000 tickets to festivals were sold in 20 hours when they announced here in the UK that there could be festivals this year. It's the demand is incredible. But I guess has that, Tim, has that demand? You said that you've had this incredible response from your community, and I'm curious as well. Not just, I'd like you to talk about kind of your concerns about the additional costs that COVID is going to bring onto the Opera House, but also, have you been able to kind of utilize new revenue opportunities during the pandemic, like live streaming and merchandising, as Cindy said? Do you think that? What are your thoughts as a venue owner in regards to that being an additional revenue source as we move into whatever this new normal is going to be? Or do you think that was just something that kind of helped keep a light on, not all the lights on, over the last year? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm curious to see what happens once whatever normal was. Normal wasn't very normal at any point in time, but when we get back to some, for lack of a better word, normal, will there be people who still want to stay home and watch a stream? I've always been not such a pro. I never wanted to go down that road prior to the pandemic. Since the pandemic, we've invested in cameras and switcher and have learned that whole new version of the world. But once we're back to normal, will people even want to sit home and watch something on their screen when they can go out and see live music? I hope that they want to go out and see live music, but we suspect there will be people who, especially in the transition period, who aren't ready to go out and interact with other humans face to face. So if we can provide them a service and it can pay for itself at least, we hope that that's mutually beneficial. Related to the live audience, we're in a strange spot. Again, I don't know if this is just related to my rural location, but it's all I know to reference. We have audience members because we've decided to postpone our festival for a second year because it takes place in June, and we didn't know where we would be. So we have some audience feeling that we're cowardice for not going forth, and then we have audience thanking us for being concerned about their safety and our safety and the artist's safety and so forth. So I have a mixed universe of patrons that we're trying to juggle. How do you move forward with that? I didn't really answer your question, I don't think, but
I guess going on Moose, what are your thoughts from a NIVA perspective as well? Like, I know some venues have embraced live streaming more than others. Some venues have had success with their merchandising and other community initiatives. Do you believe that is going to be an additional revenue source moving forward, or and what are your members that you speak to? How are they preparing for it? What are their thoughts regarding that?
I mean, I think a lot of people are, we're sort of forced into adopting something that they might not have necessarily had too much interest in, and that's fine, right? Now here's a cool trinket that you now have wired into your room that you otherwise might not have ever have wired into your room. Streaming's been around for 15, 20 years as far as a viable alternative to being there. It didn't necessarily stop people from going out. I think the difference here has been the fact that everybody had the same starting point right now, right? So think about things like Live Aid, right? Live Aid was a streamed concert. That didn't stop people from wanting to go there, but you have to have the event that people want to see. So if you're talking about a local band that's playing reasonably small venues that is going to stream every single one of their shows, well, what's the audience for that? If you're talking about a national or an international artist that is going to be able to access their audience in a bit more of a direct way, or perhaps their audience is more vulnerable or more spread out, then all of a sudden you have a lot more opportunities. I mean, the standard practice, especially if you're an artist from another country, is you come over to the US, you play a show or two or three, maybe five, right? You don't play 30. You certainly don't play 60. So if you're in rural Ohio, that's your option to be able to see the band that's only playing New York and LA. So I think that there's still options that people are going to opt into because they are a fan and they consider themselves a fan of live music, and this is their way of being able to consume that. But I don't necessarily think that one's going to replace the other. I think there will be a transition, especially with people in their own personal comfort zones. And nobody can predict the future, but I don't think we're going to see the cessation of people being there in person just because they have the option of doing it at home as well. This isn't the same thing as like movie theaters.
And I kind of want to open this up to to all of you guys. Also, one of the things that could be seen as an opportunity as we prepare for the future is, do you think that the current situation is going to provide more opportunities for local artists, because touring is not, touring is going to take a little while, especially international artists. We may not be able to see Australian or New Zealand artists for another year, maybe even longer. Who knows when we're coming out of quarantine properly here in the UK. So I'm curious if you see that as a potential opportunity, as well as a challenge that, local music may be the only or the primary live music for the next little while, and what each of your thoughts are on that.
I mean, I see that as an opportunity because, as the nonprofit Cleveland Rocks, one of the missions is to try to help local musicians. We have amazing local musicians in Cleveland, but we don't have the music industry infrastructure to help them move forward. And a lot of people have just withered on the vine. It's sort of you put a band together, after a year, you get really good, you have the highlight, and then you have 2 years of downturn because you get disappointed and you have to break up. You can't stand it anymore. So I see live streaming and being possible to kind of help people get YouTube videos together through the Beachland and the nonprofit to try to help support the local musicians.
Yeah, and how about Candace? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that for emerging talent and acts that typically don't get those big looks like the larger acts, we'll have opportunity on the other side of the pandemic. I think that virtual shows have shown or proven to be a viable option for those emerging acts. You have some artists who care about the production or the brand or the value of their show, and really aren't interested in virtual because it doesn't deliver in the same way like a live production would. But it's definitely an option. It's a good viable option for a hybrid as we get back to more live shows. I think that it's going to allow for more incremental opportunities, but as a package to the actual live landscape. But I definitely think that it's an option, but nothing is ever going to replace live music in a live physical aspect.
And from a rural perspective, Tim, is that potentially a challenge? Less access to national artists or international artists, at least for the time being, or is that an opportunity? Just trying to be devil's advocate here.
Sure. I don't think it's an actual problem. At least on the national level. So we're in like a tertiary or whatever, the fourth market. We're major market, secondary. We're 4 or 5, right? And I have more holds on my calendar than I've had in maybe ever. I'm maybe worried a little bit more about saturation during reentry, when obviously everyone wants to get back to work as soon as possible, and if everyone's on the road, to where when I start seeing like third and fourth holds on my calendar, that normally doesn't happen. I know that happens in the cities, but that means that the cities have probably 6 and 7 holds on all of these dates. So now agents are coming to me, an hour outside of Columbus. So I'm wondering if there is going to be a saturation problem. Will there be enough audience to support all of these shows during reentry? I think there will, but I have my.
What do you think?
I think that the short term is the local artists are going to benefit from this because their audience is local. They're local. The venues that are able to open will be more eager to put something on that will work in 2 weeks versus something that takes 3 months to ramp up. And that's setting aside the fact that it takes a venue 3 months to ramp up, right? You have staff and opening and reconfiguring stuff for safety reasons, etc. But I do think there's going to be a squeeze. I think that squeeze is going to come from the top down. So I think you're going to see artists that would normally play amphitheaters, playing, large indoor theaters. I think you're going to see those that would usually play large theaters getting squeezed down to play large clubs. Like the venues are going to be incentivized to be able to do almost guaranteed sellouts across the board, so the developing artists, the emerging artists, the artists from underrepresented communities in particular are going to find themselves, just forced further and further down. So I think that we need to just sort of acknowledge the fact that it's not just a matter of going to what I'll refer to as a tertiary market, one past tertiary, but it's not just a matter of going further away from home, especially if you're talking about largely urban areas that have a finite amount of space. But I also think that the positive that's going to come from this is I do think there will be a return, the roaring 20s, if you will, and the inhibitor to that is going to be how many people are going to actually have income. We have a massive unemployment rate right now. Most of that is the service industry. So, if the service industry gets put back to work, are they magically going to have disposable income? Probably not. But they're going to want to shake off the cobwebs just as much as everybody else is. So I'm not necessarily as concerned about whether there will be people there. I just want to make sure that, the folks that want to be able to enjoy it are able to access it too.
Right, and on that note, I see the time is kind of winding down. I'm at the 5-minute mark, and I thought maybe let's end with something a little bit more personal and a little bit fun. Kind of ask everyone what artists, or you can name a couple that are you most looking forward to seeing in the next couple months, or do you have tickets to a gig that's going to happen in the next few months that either has been rescheduled, or I have a whole list of gigs that have been rescheduled here in London that I'm very excited about. So maybe Candace, where are you going to be front row in the next few months?
Almost any show, but I don't want to. I work with a lot of artists and acts, and I don't want to play favoritism. But any fun-loving, cool show where everyone's up on their feet, like a Santana or maybe a jazz festival where people can kind of relax and enjoy the ambiance as well as the music. So something like that.
Like a band called Switzerland?
Perhaps a band called Switzerland, for sure.
So, and Cindy, I'm sure Cindy and Tim, you both have so much going on, but what are you most looking forward to? Or is there a show or a festival other than that you guys are really excited about the next few months?
Cindy, you want to go?
Go ahead.
I think I'm most excited to go see a show like at the local rock club with like my friends, like with friends who I've only seen in passing or online, and just to go local friends who are in bands. I'm excited to go play music, so that's what I'm most excited for. I'm also excited. Our Melted Music Festival, the state of Ohio, the mandate where they canceled shows happened the night before our second annual. So on Thursday night, we were told we weren't allowed to have our festival, which had the OCs and was going to be a great rock and roll show. So I'm ready to go out and have that blast me in the face as possible.
Fantastic. And yeah, Cindy.
The OCs are one of our favorites. They come back every year to the Beachland, like clockwork, and we had to cancel it. So that's going to be great. I mean, we had a lot of shows that are just have moved and kept moving. So I'm just hoping that they get to happen in the fall. Brent Cobb and Tab Benoit we had in November. It was the only national show that we managed to squeeze in before the second spike, and he's coming back again. And I'm just looking forward to some local shows. I'm committed to helping some local bands kind of get out there and get moving, and going to try to book them at the Hideout in Chicago and things like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing their success.
Great, and finally, Moose.
I wouldn't mind seeing the OCs. That would be a pretty awesome show to see. I have no tickets to anything. I have, the potential opening date, the reopening date. When's this going to be possible? When's it going to be safe? It keeps getting pushed back further and further. And I've watched shows just keep being pushed back further and further as well. I'm optimistic that it will happen again. I don't know how soon it is. There's so many friends I've made through this past year that, the irony of it is how many friends have we made at live shows through our entire lives. And this has been a year with no live shows. And I feel like the friendships are going to be what I remember the most out of this past year. So it'll be, I wish I could say I have one thing I'm looking forward to, but I'm just so, just tired of getting let down that like another month passes or another year passes or whatever it could be. It'll happen. And when it happens, I'll be out there, front and center or back and hidden, whichever one makes the most sense for that show. But I'm excited to be there.
Great. And, and on that note, I want to just thank all of you for taking the time to join us at the Ohio Music Conference. And thank you to Josh for bringing us together. And for me, I'm most looking forward to going to the pub and seeing a band because our pubs have been shut since December. So April 12th, they reopen.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, still 6 weeks. But I think we hope that was an optimistic conversation. We hope everyone really enjoyed spending your hour with us. Thank you. And if you want any information about any of the panelists, I'm sure you can visit their websites and contact them there. So thank you again.